Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Beruchim, Habayim. We are continuing on Masechet Succah, and we are on Daf Lamed Bit, Amud Aleph, 8 lines down from the top of the Amud, by 2 dots. Today's Amud is being learned as Zechut Rufah Shelema for Michael ben Nahid, for Rachel Simcha bat Nahid, for Esther Bracha bat Chaya, that you all have Rufah Shelema, Be'ezrat Hashem, Amen. This Amud is also dedicated by the Shea family, Dayan family, Kohen family. This should be an ultimate zechut for all their mishpachot. Amen. Amen. So we started the discussion of different types of lulav when they're not your typical tight and nice shoot of the palm tree. They're somewhat open, they're snit on the top, they're dried. What's kasher and what's pasul? And the Mishnah mentioned nifretzu alav is pasul, nifredu alav is kasher. If the branches that come out, the leaves that come out of the lulav are nifretzu, is pasul. But if they are merely separated, is kasher. So what is exactly the nifretzu alav? Says the Gemara, nifretzu alav, Amar Rav Papa, nifretzu de avid ki chufya. Nifretzu means it became like a broom. Now, back in the day, the broom was you would cut off some leaves of the branch of a palm, aka a little lulav. You would snip the leaves off of it, and then you would tie a lot of them together, and that would be your broom. So nifretzu alav means they are detached from their attachment, their chibur, to the stem, to the shedra, to the spine of the lulav, and now you tie them together to the spine, and it looks like a lulav, but because they are detached from the source, they're detached from the spine of the lulav, it's pasul. Says the Gemara, however, if you have nifredu alav, that means the lulav whose leaves are growing aligned with the stem, now they are starting to grow enough that they are separating to the two sides. The tips of the alin, the tips of the leaves are separating from the shedra, but they are still attached in their source to the bottom of the shedra. That would be kasher. Nifredu, the ifrud afrudi. They're starting to separate, that would be kasher. By Rav Papa asked the following quandary. How about if you have, when you have the spine of lulav that, corresponding from two sides, the leaves are coming out, the very top of that spine ends with one single leaf. That's going to be usually the tallest leaf that goes up in the lulav, and that is called tiyomit. Now, we mentioned that every leaf in the lulav is folded double. You could kind of like split it from the middle, right? Now imagine this top leaf, the tiyomit, split from that attachment in the middle, but it went into the shidra. In other words, the top leaf is the continuation of the shedra, of the spine. So if you start splitting that leaf from the fold in the middle that it has, it could go into the shedra, splitting down to the area that already the other leaves are separating from. So Rav Papa said, what is the halacha with that? Now you have damaged, so to speak, the shedra a little bit. That split may cost you the kashrut of your lulav, and that's the question Rav Papa asked. Nechlekat tiyomit. If the tiyomit is split in half, going down to the spine, mahu, says the Gemara, well, let's try to bring a proof from a different halakha that we already know. What happens if the tiyomit is missing? You cut off the tiyomit. You cut off the top leaf. Now, if you cut off one leaf of lulav, what happens? Nothing. Not much. But if you cut off the tiyomit, we have a clear braita about it. Tashma de Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi nitela hatiomet pasul. If you take away, if you cut away the tiomet, the top leaf, then your lulav is pasul. It's going to cost you your lulav. So my love, hu adi nechleka. Let us suggest that the same halacha should be if the leaf is there, but it's no longer a leaf because you split it from the middle. So maybe that already should be considered pasul. The Gemara says no. Lo. Nitela shani. It's very different. It's very different when you have nitela versus nifreta. Nitela shani deha chaserle. If you took it away, then it's chaser. Come on over here. If you took it away, if you cut it off, so to speak, then your lulav is chaser, is missing something. And when it's missing something, of course it's going to be pasul. But if it's just split, it's a technical problem for one leaf, but it's not missing. Everything is there. You didn't cut away anything. So says the Gemara, shani, nitla shani de'a chaser le, and therefore it will be pasul. But you have no proof for nisteka hatiomet or nechleka hatiomet. Ikadamri, there are those who say this a little bit in a reverse order. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Shlomo ben Levi. That Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shlomo ben Levi, nechleka tiomet, if you have this tiomet split in the middle, na'asa kemish nitla tiomet, it becomes like equivalent halachically of tiomet being cut off because the leaf now is pasul. If it's nechleka all the way split in the middle, that leaf is as though it's not there. And because we know tiomet is not just your regular ordinary leaf, it's the most important leaf in your lulav, the top middle one. And therefore, if you render that leaf invalid halachically, it's as if it's not there. So Rabbi Yochanan in this second lashon, Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shlomo ben Levi, if you render your middle top leaf, aka tiomet, invalid halachically, even though that's not chaser, it's still there, it will be considered as though the leaf is not there, and it will be pasul. Fine. Says Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, the next piece that we studied in the Mishnah was, Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you have nifredu alav that we said is kasher, we just got finished saying that if the leaves are attached to the spine, but they're just separating under tip top, then it's fine, it's kasher, as long as they're attached to the spine. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says, even that, you have to tie them up, because the lulav has to look like one nice, solid shoot. It can't have like leaves coming open from the two sides, so you have to tie them together on the top. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Omer yakdelu milamala. Tanya, we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda Omer mishum Rabbi Tarfon. We learned in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, what is the source of this halakha that Rabbi Yehuda says? Kapot temarim, that when it says the name of lulav, it doesn't say lulav. It says kapot temarim, right? Ulkachtem lachem b'yom harishon, pri etz hadar, kapot temarim v'chule. So kapot temarim, we only know that it's talking about something about date, right? We don't know what exactly it is. So what is this kapot temarim? All we know from the pasuk so far directly is that we are talking about a palm tree. We don't know what part of palm tree we're talking about even. How do we know it's lulav? We're going to get to in just a moment. But for the beginners, says the Braita, Rabbi Yehuda learned kapot means it has to be kafut, it has to be tied. Kafut means tied up. So says Rabbi Tarfon, kapot temarim kafut. You read it in the drasha way that it has to be tied. That im haya parud ichfetenu. That if the leaves are starting to separate from the spine on their top, you tie them together back to the spine, looking like one nice solid shoot that's all attached. So now the Gemara is going to challenge this Rabbi Tarfon. Amar le Ravina Rav Ashi. Ravina says, Mimai dehai kapot temarim de lulavahu. How do we even know the words kapot temarim is referring to lulav? It could be referring to anything else. I'll give you an example. Says Ravina. These are again the two authors of the Gemara, Ravina and Rav Ashi, the last generation of Amoraim, speaking about the Shita of the Tanaim Rabbi Tarfon. So says the Gemara, said Ravina to Rav Ashi, Ema charuta. Why don't we say that it should be a charuta? We just had this before. Now, charuta is when you have branches of palm tree, which they used to be a lulav, and you leave it for 2, 3, 4 years, so they grow, they become solid, and then from them already there are other shoots growing up that they also became grown up and solid, right? So maybe kapot temarim is talking about that, like a solid branch of a palm tree. You're telling me that only one little thing in the tippy top of a palm tree is kasher, which is what we call lulav. It's a fresh leaf, not leaf, but it's a fresh branch coming out. It's a fresh shoot coming out. It's going to be later on one of the lulavim. But what if he already grown up? It's already 2 years, 3 years, and it became nice and big and dried, and now there are other things coming out of it. That should be kapot temarim. This is what I know. Can't be. Why? Because ba'ina kafot veleka. We need to be able to tie them together, like kafut veleka. All of these shoots on the side have become completely dried and hardened. You can't bring them together, tie them together, so it's a chisaron of kafut. Again, we're dealing with this drasha of Rabbi Tarfon that has to be tied together. So it says, even though that this main branch that's 3, 4 years old has side things coming off of it, they are also dried and hardened like a wood, and therefore you can't tie them, bring them back together as it was, and therefore it's not kapot temarim. Can't be. So says Gemara, okay. Next attempt, Ravina says, Ve'ema ufta. Let us say that it is ufta. Now, what is ufta? The Gemara is going to shoot this down as well. The Rashi says ufta is me'ikar hadekel shu chalak. It's like part of the trunk, something like that. It's like a solid piece of the trunk of the palm tree. So that's also kapot temarim. It's a palm tree. You want palm tree? Here it is. You want it to look like one? Here it is. It's the ultimate one. It is literally one piece. Mara says no. When it says kapot temarim, means you should be able to tie it together, which indicates that it could be separate, that you should be able to bring it together. This could never be separate. It's a one piece, solid piece. So therefore, it's not kapot temarim. So says the Gemara, kafut miklal deika pirud. It has to be able to be separate, that you should be able to tie it back together. Otherwise, it's not called kapot milashon kafut. So we are still working within the premise of Rabbi Tarfon, that the reason it says kapot temarim, it comes from the language, in the drasha world, it comes from the language of kafut, being tied together. So Mara says, therefore, it can't be a piece of wood of the palm tree, because a piece of wood has nothing splintering away from it that you should be able to bring it together. A palm leaf, which we call lulav, it has different leaves, small leaves coming off of it, and when they grow, they kind of like separate, and then you could tie it together. That makes sense, kafut. But a piece of the trunk, which is a solid piece of wood, has nothing coming off of it that you should be able to bring together as being kafut. The Gemara now attempts completely a different thing. Says the Gemara, Ve'ema ufta, kaput miklal deika perud. Ve'hai kafut ve'omed le'olam. This is a solid piece, is always as one. It has nothing separating away from it that you should be able to bring them together, and therefore it can't be kapot temarim. Ve'ema kufra. Why don't we say, it says, look at Rashi, kufra hainu nami etz ke'ein charuta ela adayin ben shana o shte shanim. The same item that we attempted in the very beginning, that's a larger branch of a palm tree, but it's not 3 or 4 years old, it's like a 1-year-old branch that's starting to harden, still is soft enough that you could tie it nicely together. So maybe it's talking about that. So it's not the lulav that we take, it is much larger than that when it has already opened, but it's only 1 year old, so it's not that hardened that you can't bring the things together. You still could bring them together, tie them together. So this is an amazing concept the Gemara is going to now say. It can't be. Amar Abaye, deracheha darche noam v'chol netivotea shalom. The Torah's pathways are pleasant and peaceful. Can't be that the Torah gave you a mitzvah that's going to scratch all your hands, because this is a palm leaf, a 1-year-old, 2-year-old palm leaf is full of thorns on the side. If you take it, it's going to be horrible for your hands. It's a very unpleasant thing. And that's supposed to be a mitzvah, can't be a mitzvah. We'll see the Gemara is going to come back to this again, but this becomes like a halachic thing. It can't be, if I don't have a clear thing, the Torah says something about the palm tree, and I have to determine something that checks all the boxes, and you're thinking that this checks all the boxes. It has branches, it could be kafut, tied together, all check, but there's another box that you have to check. There's this Rav Asher Weiss once told me that he's one of the leading poskim. So he was about 12 years ago. He was in a group of myself and my friends. We were talking to him, and he said he tells his students. Again, this is coming from a giant of Torah. He said, if you find yourself that the Torah is making you do things that are not pleasant, are weird, you most probably got the wrong pshat somewhere in understanding what you should be doing. Because the Torah does not make a strange person. The Torah makes people that are sensitive, loyal, pleasant, geschmack. That's what the Torah makes. If you find yourself doing strange things, that probably means that you got the wrong pshat somewhere along the way. So says the Gemara, that's Abaye. The Gemara completely wears off of Rabbi Tarfon. It says, who even said that kapot temarim means kafut? Maybe kapot temarim means clusters of temarim. You know how the temarim grow in clusters? So kapot temarim maybe means like 2 clusters of dates. That's what you should take. Awesome, right? So says the Gemara, Amal Rava Tosfa Ravina, Ve'ema Tarti Kapi de Tamri. Let us suggest that Kapot Temari means Tarti Kapi de Tamri, 2 clusters of dates. Well, I says, no, you can't say 2 clusters of dates because we read it Kapot, but it says Kapat, doesn't have a Vav. So you can't say that. Kapat Ketiv. Well, I said, okay, fine, no problem. So it's 1 cluster of temarim. It's even easier to carry, right? Ve'ema chada. I says, no, because you wouldn't call that kapat temarim. You would call that kaf karile. So kapot cannot be translated. The Gemara basically shoots it down. You can't say that kapot temarim is a reference to the cluster of dates, and that's that. So therefore, it's like a process of illumination that we learn from this process of elimination. It can't be this, it can't be that, it can't be this, it can't be that, it can't be the trunk, it can't be the bigger branches, it can't even be the smaller, bigger branches, it can't be the cluster of dates. So what's left? The only thing that's left that checks all boxes, and it's the rachad darche noam v'chol netivotea shalom, is the lulav that we take, like the fresh shoot of a palm tree. So it says, now the Gemara, Amar Abaye, This is Sineh Hara Barzel. The next item in the Mishnah was Sineh Hara Barzel Kishra. You remember what Sineh Hara Barzel was? This is an area that must be not so productive to growth of trees. So the type of palm tree that grows there has very little leaf. It does not have a lot of leaves. So each one of the leaves kind of like, covers the end of the other one, as we'll see in just a moment. But it's a lulav with very few leaves coming out of it. And that, the Mishnah said, is kasher. So says the Gemara, Sineh Hara Barzel Kshera, Amar Abaye, Lo Shanu Er Asher Rosho Shel Ze Magia Letzad Ikaro Shel Ze. Says Abaye, sometimes Sineh Hara Barzel are pasul. It's only sometimes that's kasher. What's the criteria? The minimum criteria is that the tip of the leaf on the bottom reaches the root of the leaf on the top. So if you have two leaves coming off from the stem and they don't reach the bottom, the top of this one does not reach the bottom of that one, is pasul. Only if they overlap a little bit, the leaves, and when you look at the stem, you don't see any of the stem because it's all leaves that you see. That's when it's kasher. But if it doesn't reach out to each other, then it will be pasul, says Abaye. Now, the Gemara is going to go through proving this point also. We also learned this in Braita, exactly like this. We learned in the Braita exactly the opposite way. That instead of our Mishnah that says Sineh Hara Barzel is kasher, the Braita says Sineh Hara Barzel is pasul. And says the Gemara, we learned in the Mishnah Sineh Hara Barzel is kasher. The Braita says pasul. How can it be? The Gemara must be El Ashma Mina Ka'Abaye. It comes to teach you, like Abaye said, that there are different types of Sineh Hara Barzel. Some of them are pasul. If the leaves are not reaching each other, they're not overlapping at all, then would be pasul. But if they're overlapping, then it would be kasher. Shma Mina Ka'Abaye. Shma Mina. Says the Gemara, Ve'ika de Rami le Mirma. There are those who ask and answer this as a question-answer form. They question the Mishnah with the Braita, and the answer of Abaye is the answer to the problem. Ve'ika de Rami le Mirma. Tenan, we learned the Mishnah in Masechet Sukkah. Sineh Hara Barzel kasher. Ve'Tanya, and the Braita says, no, it's pasul. How can you have that? I mean, the whole thing starts with a question-answer form, asking from the Braita on our Mishnah. And the Gemara says, Amar Abaye, Abaye is coming to answer the question by saying, look, Hasha, it's not really a question. Our Mishnah is talking about the case that the leaves overlap, and they're covering, the top of one covers the bottom of the other, and the Braita is talking about the case that they don't overlap, the leaves are shorter or less, and therefore it would be pasul. לא קשה כאן שראשו של זה מגיע לצד עיקרו של זה, כאן שאין ראשו של זה מגיע לצד עיקרו של זה. Fine, says the Gemara. Now before this, by the way, why is this called Sineh Hara Barzel? You have to talk about it, right? Well, the Gemara is going to give the geographical reality of this Sineh Hara Barzel, which actually becomes fascinating. Let's see if we can get to it. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Merion Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi ve'amri latan Rabba bar Mari mishum Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. You know what this Sineh Hara Barzel is? Shtet marot yesh begei behinom. There are two palm trees in the valley of Behinnom, right? There was named after somebody or whatnot. Historically, there was a lot of fire there as well. They would burn their garbage and waste there. But however you say it, there are two palm trees there in Ge Behinnom, in the valley of Behinnom. Ve'oleh ashan miberehem, and there is smoke coming up from in between them. Ve'zeu sheshaninu, and these two palm trees are the reference to this that we learned in the Mishnah Sineh Hara Barzel Kesherot. That the lulavim of these two palm trees are kasher. And you know what this is? This marks Vezu hi pitcha shel Gehinnom. And this is the glorified gates of Gehinnom, right? So Behinnom, this valley of Behinnom, is actually a place that we have, even though that Gehinnom is a metaphysical thing, it's not necessarily a physical thing. The Eshel Gehinnom, Chazal talk about it in fascinating ways. Maybe we'll have to discuss that in the rate bite in the beginning of the next shiur, what exactly the Metziut of Gehinnom is. We reference to it a lot in different shiurim as a very warm place, but in the Maaseh, just like Gan Eden has a reality down in this world, and the Ben Ish Chai actually was asked questions about it it's in the back of the Shelot Utshuvot Rapa'alim, in the chelek that he has on Kabbalistic questions, Sot Yesharim in Siman Gimal. He was asked, how do you have a place that fits all of these things from Sheshet Yimei Bereshit until now, and we don't even know, we know every inch of the physical world almost. So where is this that we don't know where it is, right? Gan Eden is certainly indicated in Chumash as a physical place, and now we have Gehinnom here in the Gemara explained as a physical place as well, even though that we know that, like the Ramchal writes, both Gan Eden and Gehinnom. Gan Eden, he says, Mador leMalachim, is a spiritual, metaphysical space, and so is Gehinnom. But here is Pitcho Shel Gehinnom. It's very actually interesting that the Petach of Gehinnom is marked by Tamarim. The Maharsha in Eruvin writes something very interesting. It says, Tamarim are very sweet. This is indicative that sometimes the sweetness, the pleasures, the draw of Olam Hazeh, sometimes it will lead to the Petach of Gehinnom, right? You know, that's how Yetzer Hara gets a person. By the way, that's why it's called Sineh Hara Barzel, because later on in the Gemara, we're actually not that far from it. We're closer than farther. In Daf Nun Bet, the Gemara is going to have a whole piece on Yetzer Hara, 7 different names of Yetzer Hara, and so on and so forth. One of the names of Yetzer Hara is Har, a mountain, right? A mountain because it says Sadikim nidme lahem kahar, right? After Ba'av Esrim, when Sadikim are shown the Yetzer Hara that they had, and they fought and they battled and they won, you see a massive mountain that they conquered, right? The Rashaim, it seems to them like a little string that they couldn't even, with a little string, the guy runs after Yetzer Hara, right? So it's called mountain, and why is it called Har HaBarzel? Because the Gemara says, Yetzer Hara im paga becha menuval ze, if the Yetzer Hara menuval, this how do you say it? Disgusting. Okay. This menuval sounds better that way, right? If Yetzer Hara bumps into you, you know what's the way to do it? Moshcheu lebet HaMidrash. You bring him to Amud Yomi shir, right? And it says, in barzelhu, if it's in stone, it will be mitposes, it will explode to pieces. If in barzelhu, if it's metal, it will melt away. So you see, a reference to Yetzer Hara is also barzel. So Har HaBarzel is this mountain of barzel, which, again, its reference says Aruch Laner, like a person that becomes a prisoner by Yetzer Hara. If you start listening to Yetzer Hara, it becomes bigger and bigger. It becomes harder and harder to break away from it. You want to call it dopamine, you want to call it whatever you want to call it. It becomes harder and harder to break free from this. It becomes like a Hara Barzel. It becomes like an iron metal that you cannot escape from easily, and therefore we call it Hara Barzel. Right? And maybe it's very interesting to say that the lulav, right, which this is just me thinking, a lulav, which represents our spine. We all know that Chazal already say that 4 species of the lulav represent the senses that we have and how we operate. The hadassim are like the eyes that the person has, and has hadas meshulash because he has to have your mind involved as well. Like that's the ein hasechel, and the aravod is the lips and the power of speech. The etrog is the heart and your feelings, your desires, and the lulav is the main one in the sense that it's the executive branch. It's what you do. All of your nerves is in the spine. A person is paralyzed without this spine, can't do anything. All the doings is from the spine, and it says the things that come out of it is the executive orders, so to speak, coming out of this. Branching out is the actions. If your actions are consistent, that the bottom of one is covered by the top of the previous one, it's consistent mitzvot, consistent actions, that lulav is kasher. That's the determining factor on petach hageilam, who goes in, who doesn't go in. And what saves a person, b'shat adin, Chazal say it's Torah mitzvot. It's the only thing that accompanies a person, not the money that you amass, not anything else, but it's the mitzvot Torah u'masim tovim. And that if a person has consistent, attached a chain of non-stop mitzvot, that is really the protection, like the Gemara says in Masechet Succah, Daf Chaf Aleph, that Torah is magna u'matzla. The Torah is magen from Yisrael, matzil mi Yetzer Hara. It's the ultimate shield, the iron dome from Yetzer Hara. So there's a lot to think about when you talk about this Gemara of Tzinei HaBarzel being kasher. Bezrat Hashem, we'll continue this in the days to come.